Hello, guys. So, very good morning. Yesterday, we were saying this Ajax. We saw about the get method, but due to some technical issue, we were not able to complete it. So, I'm just giving you the overview about what we saw yesterday about the get method. Okay. We saw each and every line, what each and every line is giving us. But today, let us just take it as a whole and just consider what all things are happening. In the first place, we have taken one URL. Okay, where we got this URL from? We are using one public API basically. This is a dummy API where it has a lot of routes and we can use them to have our own practice. So this is that link. Now, using one keyword which is fetch, if I pass this URL inside it, basically I am doing the get method. So this time I don't have to explicitly tell that I am doing get method. If I'm not passing anything, it just mean that I'm just using get method. Okay, here what was happening? This fetch URL, this fetch was actually giving us returning a function promise. Okay, so when it returned a promise, we can consume that promise. So we try to console that promise which this was returning, and after consoling it, after just consuming it, we are using dot then, and here response we have used. Okay, so response is basically to collect the data which the earlier promise was giving us. Here we saw that one condition, that sometimes, most of the time, response.ok is true. Okay, but sometimes when this URL is not right, or if something is failing, at that time response.ok gives us false. Response, this OK is a property in this response. Okay, so we have put one condition here that if response.ok is true, then only just return me this response.json file. Okay, otherwise don't give me. Now again, when we saw that response.json, that this response.json was again a promise, right? Also here we used one else condition and we throw the error. Now response.json was again a promise. So we again consumed it with the dot then. Here we have collected it as this data. Okay, and now okay. So now when we console this data, we got the actual output which we were looking for. What was this data? It was the array of objects. It was having 100 objects around. Okay, and finally, since we are throwing this catch, so to handle the error, we have used this dot catch. And now here we have taken collected this as error and simply consoled it. So this was this simple. What you need to remember is this fetch returns a promise, we collect it, it gives us response. Okay, afterwards this response.json means when we use response.json function, it also gives us a promise, we collect, consume it in the form of data, and this data is finally the output. Okay, so this was about get method. Let us just try to quickly see on the console what is actually happening. um Wait. So today we are on the line, means day number 18. Let me just close everything. Okay. Here if I go for the here I'm just uncommenting this get method. Okay. Now, if you go and see the console, we are getting 404 error because I had actually incorrected this, means made some mistake in this URL. Now when I have corrected it, let's see what data we are getting. It is the actual data which we were expecting, right? So this was about a get method. Now this is simple, isn't it? Going ahead, we have post method. Post method is basically used to put something. Means if you want to create some data, if you want to write some data, then we have to use this post method. Okay, let's see the syntax of this post method. So now here if you see what we are having again this fetch. Okay. Inside this fetch earlier we were only passing URL, but this time since it is post we need to assign some data as well, that what need data we need to add. So here what we are doing, if you just follow this purple braces here, it is completing this kind of object we have to pass. Okay, and where do I get this object from? It depends on which kind of API we are using. So here if you see, whenever you go on the post and just see these guides, you can see that such kind of object it is demanding, means what is the basically body, what kind of parameters it is having, that we have, that depends from API to API. So for here we were having title, body, and user ID. Okay, so this time what kind of object we need to have, just see this purple curly braces. Okay, now, here if you see, first one is method. We need to pass method. Earlier we didn't pass any method. Why? Because by default it is considered that okay, it is get method. So now here in the method we are passing post. In the body, what we have to do, we are passing one object. Can you see this means highlighted part, this yellow curly braces? This is the object which we need to pass. If you notice earlier, every means data, every post, there was a object. So whenever we want to send the object, since it is JSON format, we have to send it in the object form only. And whenever body is sent, we have to stringify it. So what we use json.stringify. Clear? Now, so simply this is our body prepared, this is what we want as a data. Everything before will be overridden and only this object will be visible now. And also we have to pass this headers, which is content type application json, which basically tells us what kind of data format we are basically using. And this encoding format also you have to add. Now, going ahead, this was about simply what we are writing in the fetch. If you notice, this is simply earlier we were just writing fetch URL, but this time there is a slight change here. What all things we have to add? We have to add another object, and this object is containing three things mainly: method, body, and headers. Okay, I hope this format is clear. Now, next is this fetch as a whole. If you see, this fetch will return a promise as usual, so we have to consume it, so we are consuming here. Okay, similar to the previous situation, we are taking it in the collecting it in the response. Okay, we are checking if response.ok is true, then we have to return response.json, otherwise throw some error. Now this response.json will again return a promise, so again we are consuming it with the help of den. Okay, here I have consumed, means here I have tried to console that we are doing post method. In the catch I have consoled we are inside data, and also error I have printed, here I have printed this data. Okay, let's see how it is working on the console. So here if you see, we got post console. Why? Because this then means block must have run. It must have executed. So here we got post. And what data we are getting? This kind of data. Remember this data somewhere. Let me just see. Now it will be much easier to see. Here in the fetch, in the body, we send something: title, body, user ID, right? So these are the things which we have got. And this ID, if you notice that we have not sent this ID, every data has some ID, okay? Because we have to keep track how many are there, and each of them shares a individual ID. So here, individual unique ID to be very clear. Now here, title, body, and user ID are as we what we sent. Now if I just make some correction here, then and again run it, let's see what it happens. In the title, what we got? Full store. Because if you notice, whatever we are passing here, that everything will be stored here. Okay, so this was about it. This was about post. What we got earlier, we were getting 100 posts, right? But this time we have overridden everything, and then we are getting only one object. So this is about it. Now we are saying another thing, which is put method. Okay, what put method will do? Post method is actually doing creating something, right? So we created something. Let's say this foo store, let me just correct it. It was foo store foo earlier, right? So earlier what we were having only foo, but this time let me just comment this post one. Okay, when I share this code, you can also play around with it like this only. Just comment and comment something, add something, console something. Then only you can see how is it actually executing. Now, see what is the UR means what is the syntax of put. Everything is similar, but here what change is doing I am doing. Here if we go on the public URL which we are using, basically public API. Now for the put, you have to correct one of the, you have to use one of the id. So here one represent id. Okay, so here also in the url, what we have done, we have just added something like slash one we have added. Okay, so these kind of changes are happening only when in the first id. Okay, so now what we have to do, method we have to use put, body, in the body we have to use the same similar things whatever this api is means it is expecting, title, body, user id that we have passed. And now, for example, earlier the title was foo and this time I have foo updated because we need to update it, right? Put it simply means you want to update something. So here we have just updated whatever in the body we want to add on. Then the headers remain the same, and every body means this fetch is returning object. Then again this response.json is returning object. Then we are collecting it in data, that all are similar like as it was before. Okay, so you need to just learn one time, just go through it one time, that what is the syntax, and every time for every kind of method it is similar. Okay, and now if you see here in the title we are getting foo updated. Let's go on. Now we want to see delete. Okay, as the word says delete means we want to delete something. Okay, this time what we are doing, we want to delete this first user id. Okay, what do you have to add in the method? Simply delete. See, in the put and body, in the post and put, we need to pass body and headers. Okay, why? Because that is the data we want to add. The word means the method itself says that we want to update something, we want to write something. But here in the get and delete, we don't have to write something. What we have to do, we have to do simply operation. So we just have to mention that this is the method. Delete. Okay, no requirement of body or headers is there. Again the rest of the things are again similar, that we are doing this delete. And also just remember you have to update the url on which kind of url you want to do. Now you will wonder how will I know that this is the syntax of the url. So again the api which you are using, that will tell you. Here see, delete has told me to use this way, so I have used it this way. This is the case with which each of the APIs. Okay. And now if you see when I'm consoling the data, I'm getting it empty. Why? Because everything is deleted. This, it was having one ID only and this ID is deleted. Hope it is clear now. Right? Now, next on we are having, let me just browse it. So this is what we saw today about means this was basically the CRUD operations of the API. Okay, and another thing, mostly fetch API can be used, but some of them use Axios, so that you can explore the overall things. Whatever is happening, that is like this only. Okay, maybe the syntax, the some kinds of things will be changed. Otherwise, everything is similar to these methods only. Another thing which we need to see is async await. Okay, let me tell you what is the need of async await. Actually, what is happening now when we are using promises? Okay, earlier, let me just take you to that example. See, we were tired of this callback hell, right? This pyramid of doom, which is making that we were tired of. So what we did, we used promises. Okay, now promises is converting us into this flat code. But here again, see, this is very simple. Everything is quite understandable, but still there must be some cases or there must be some project in which doing again this dot then becomes tedious, right? Because what happens, our function is here. Okay, this is our function. Now again we have to see in the dot then what is actually happening. So this is sometimes asynchronous as well, is sometimes confusing. Okay, so we need to what we have done, we have tried to just remove this dot then every time. This is showing that our code is asynchronous, right? After this will happen, after this will happen. But what I need to do, as a whole, JavaScript is doing synchronous work only, right? But here we are seeing that a lot of asynchronously it is written. So now when I am tired of this dot then again, what I have done, I have used another thing, and the concept is of async await. Okay, it simply allows us to write promise based code, right? the previous promise based code as if it was synchronous. So now we will write as if it is synchronous, means then and there we will write. Okay. So this means the notes you can read ahead. What I want to tell you is, see here, if a function is having a promise, okay, then if it is returning a promise, we can use async with that function. Okay, what we use with that function, async keyword. And if a promise is being returned somewhere, see this fetch URL used to return us a promise, right? If a promise is used inside any function, we will use async keyword. This is the first point. Clear? Second point is, if something is returning a promise, just put await ahead of it. Okay. And then no need to use dot then such kind of things, because what we were doing earlier, just let me have a real showing you the difference what we are trying to do here. Okay. Wait for a while. See here. Now just see the code from left and right. Okay. See what we were doing from the fetch URL, we were doing dot then we were getting this response we were checking, and then again we were consuming it, and then we were actually getting this response.json, right? This time what we want to do is, see this fetch URL will give us promise. Okay, so what you need to do is simply put await in front of it and then keep it into something. Here, this response is also doing the same thing, means it is storing whatever the promise values are returned. Similarly, this is response is also doing the same thing. Now, again, here response.json was again returning a promise. So here again, we have taken data, and this response.json, since it is returning a promise, we have put await in front of it, and then here is stored the data. Later also we were consuming it and trying to store the data, right? So in place of these things, what I have done, I have just simply put two lines here. Let me just remove this error handling part for some time to make it simpler. See what is happening. Here also, just let me make it quite simple. Okay. Now, if you see these two, it will make more sense. First of all, fetch URL was returning a promise, right? So here also it is returning a promise, and whenever something is returning a promise, we will put await in front of it. And when we will put await, when we have used async keyword in front of this function. Okay. Now we were consuming this promise, whatever this fetch URL was giving, in the form of response. Here also we have just put one variable response. Now again, this response.json was returning a promise, right? So here again, this response.json is returning a promise. So we have put await in front of it, and we have stored the data in the form of data variable. Here, how we will consuming the data, by using dot then, okay, and collecting it in this then parameter. Similar conditions are happening here. Now, what you are going to do with this function, that simply now this data is the required data. You all know whatever this response.json returns, that data is the final data. So just simply return this data. And this data is again means here what this response.json is giving, it is giving us a promise. Okay, so here this data is actually a promise. So what we have done, we have actually returned this data. So as a whole, if you see, this function is returning a promise. Since this function is returning a promise, we can use async keyword. And if something else is inside, if something else is using promises again and again, then we can use await. Okay, so even if it is not returning, then if await is used, async you have to use with the function. If async is used with the function, then there must be some return means promises which must be using. Okay. Now let's see what this get post is doing. Now if I want to consume this data, what do I need to do? Since this data is a promise, so I need to consume it. So as a whole, I can consume this function. I will call this function use dot then. Now store it in my data. Now my data, when I print, it is again the 100 post. Okay, 100 post. So this is what we needed. And similarly, in between, just like I erased this error handling part, then you can use one catch operator also. So here, if you notice both of them, here we used two times dot then, okay, and then dot catch. So it was quite confusing that which of the for which promise we are using dot then. Now here for which promise we are using dot then. So this was quite confusing. But here if you notice, it is very clear that fetch URL is returning promise. So we have used response here. This response.json is returning promise. So we have used data here. And then as a whole, this data is being returned as a promise. So for one time only, we have used this dot then and dot catch. Okay. So now we have made this promise code very simpler. So this is what we intend to use with async and await. Now, if you see, it is looking very synchronous code, right? That every time this is all like it is a variable, simple variable. Okay, so have made asynchronous code to look like synchronous code. Clear? Another thing which I wanted to cover was about the modules. Okay, so see what happens. We till now in our project we have always have one index.html, one index.js. But sometimes it is not possible that we have only two type of files, only one HTML, only one JS. There are a lot of JS files in the real projects, right? So what we need to do, if we have made something in one file, we need to use that in another file also sometimes. So how do you pass it? How do you just communicate between these two? So there plays the role of module. Okay, one thing you need to notice that when we are using this script, that time you can use this type equals to module. This will help us in a lot of way, just like differ users helps us. Okay, now when I'm talking to just pass on something, what we have to do, we have to basically export something from somewhere. Means suppose I made something in India, now I want to export it in America. Okay, so what I have to do, I have to just export from India, and then the people from America will import it. Okay, so these two things have to be done. Just like the simple import export which we have learned about in the business section, similar thing happens here with our cases, with our properties here. So now the first way of export, let us see. The first way of export is, suppose I have this class. Okay, I'm not going inside what is it written, because this is all clear. What is a class, what is constructor, these are all the parameters, this is the method here. Now if I want to export this entire class, what I can do, I can simply write export. Okay. If I want to export this f name, then what I can use, I can use export default. What are the two cases? Why are these two different? That I'll just show you. See, when you are, see here, we were exporting something. What we were exporting, we exported this f name. Okay, how we exported? With the keyword export default. Okay, now if you see how you will import this f name, you will simply without curly braces you will write import f name, because we have defaultly exported it. But here, if you say with the class, we have not used default. We can use only one default in one file. Okay. Here we have to simply export it normally. How? Just write the export keyword. Now, if you want to import, you will write import keyword. Then in the curly braces, you have to write that thing. Here, the name of the class is person. So here you can write person. Okay. And from where you are importing? From info.js. See, this is the name of the file, info.js. So from here in the app.js, you are importing something. So what is the syntax? First of all, just whenever you are exporting, write either export default or export. When you are writing export default, how you will import? Just write import. Without curly braces, you can use the exact name. And if you are simply exporting without using default keyword, then you have to use curly braces. Okay, and then from and the name of the file. This is the way. Second way is, let's see here. I have used export const age. Okay, now this is marks. And now later, see, age I have exported in the first place. This is the first line, right? In the first line, when I am creating age, at that time only I just exported, just like before we were doing. But here what I have done, I have created the marks like this. There must be a lot of code in between, and in the end of the file I am writing export marks. See here how I am writing in the curly braces. So now what you can do, if you want to import this age, you can directly import. Okay. Similarly, you can import this marks directly. But there is one more case. Suppose here it is the name of the marks is marks. This variable's name is marks. But in another file, let's say in this app.js, I want to use it as score. For now, what we were doing, what is the name of the variable here, or this class here, that exact thing we were using. But this time I want to change the variable, I want to use it as something else. We call it aliasing. Okay, so what I have to do, I have to write this simple syntax. Earlier, if I want to use it as marks only, so I will write like this. But this time, since I want to use it like score, so I will marks as a score, use like this. So now if you can see, you can use this score marks as score. Okay, you can't, you see, if you want to console here, if you want to use means if you want to print this, you have to use this score now. But if you are using marks, it will say undefined. Why? Because this marks is not existing here in the app.js. How you have exported it, here you have exported imported it in the form of aliasing, and you have given the name score. So they don't know marks anymore, what they know is score. Okay, so remember some of these points here. These are the simple things which I wanted to you to know. Okay. So now when I have import means see here, I have exported all these things. F name I have exported, age I have exported, score I have exported. So this time you can use all of them. F name, age, score. Okay. So this was about the modules, mainly export and import. So you need to just remember one thing. Just remember, forget everything. Just remember one important point. If you are doing export cons means export default, that time you can use it as it is, whatever the value of the variable is. But if you are not using default, then you have to import it in the form of curly braces. Okay. So that was about the entire course of our JavaScript, and we have these 18 folders. I have uploaded all of them to the GitHub. You can see there, you can start the GitHub repository, and in case of any doubt, just reach out to me. You have my number. Okay, so just keep learning, practice a lot. Everything will come. Means teaching is different, learning is different, but when you practice, then that is the actual learning. Okay. For now, you have just heard about it. But if you go on using this, if you again from yourself just try to console what this fetch URL is giving, what it is giving, that will just boost your confidence a lot. And also it will improve your learning, because as we say, we learn from mistakes, right? So just try to make some mistake. Okay, then bye bye guys, happy learning.